Well, I better grab my notepad so I can do my secretarial duties. And
I went ahead and started the recording, waiting to see if anybody
oh,
else
good.
comes in because it's usually about 5 minutes after we get people kind of trickling in.
Sure.
Yeah, people get that alarm and it's like, oh, it's time for the meeting. Better jump on, you know?
Or if they're like me, it goes off and you're like, "Oh crap, I had a meeting."
Yeah. Here, I gotta step aside for a minute here. Is that?
Hey, Josh, when this is over, are we able to get an attendees list or anything like that?
Yeah, we can do the attendance list for you.
Appreciate
We
it.
already we have to do one anyway for our own attendance and record keeping for SBE National. So yeah, we'll definitely have a list, and I can get you a copy of that.
Appreciate that. And then I assume you take this link and email it out to the whole chapter afterwards for the folks that couldn't make it.
Yep, I could do that, and then we also upload the video to our YouTube channel as well, so that way members can watch us as well.
Perfect.
Well, send the list to me too. That's 90% of my secretarial duties.
Yeah, you don't need it. You're fine.
The other thing I'll do is I will send a copy of the PDF, Josh or Jamie will.
Okay,
And
perfect.
Thank you. You can distribute that as well. That way people have the information. Carl has to take 0 notes tonight. He gets the night off.
Oh, you don't know me. I take notes anyway.
Carl,
Bob and Christian, you guys been quiet.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Hey, Christian. How are you?
Hey, good to see you
right,
since the dinner in December. How are things going?
It's the Rathskeller. Everything's going good. Everything's going good. Still shopping around a little bit here, but getting some more opportunities going. So everything's great.
Good.
Carl, what's your last name?
Dole, Dole. Just like the pineapple.
You look very familiar. We presented to the indie group probably 4 or 5 years ago with
I was
Chuck.
on that meeting. Yeah.
Okay, with Chuck Kelly.
Yeah, I was on the meeting. I was there.
You kind of look a little bit like Chuck.
I don't think so.
Younger and more handsome, right?
Yeah, you're younger and better looking, but Chuck's got the radio voice. He's like, "Hey guys."
He's a radio guy, so he's got
He's
that
got
radio
a total
voice.
radio voice. It's funny because we've spoken to probably 50 SBEs now across the country.
Over that. Yep.
And you can always tell the radio guys because they have the nicest voices.
Oh, yeah.
Mama always said I have a voice for TV and a face for radio. Well, it's 5 after. I say if you guys want to go ahead and get started, we can, and hopefully other people will start trickling in. But I'll go ahead and start too. Welcome to the Chapter 25 meeting. We got 4 members here, which I think does count for quorum, right, Carl? Or is it 5?
I thought it was 6. I don't know. You're the chair.
We're members too, so we can help contribute to the quorum.
Sweet. All right, we got quorum.
Oh, okay.
I'll call quorum.
Both members.
All right, perfect. So in terms of business, the only other business I got outstanding right now is we have elections coming up next month. Definitely need people to sign up if they want to run. Right now, there's really nobody. So anybody, if they're interested, especially in the chairman and treasurer's positions, we are looking for people to run for those positions. So if anybody's interested, let me know. Aside from that, I've got nothing else. Carl, anything from your end?
Well, I volunteered to continue on as secretary, so that position's taken.
And thank you for that. Bob can only be chairman and treasurer, not secretary at the same time. So he didn't know I just volunteered him for those, and he's welcome.
Yes.
All right. Aside from that, I've got nothing. So we'll go ahead and move on to the presentation from Bear and Jamie from LumenServe here to talk about tower lighting. So, gentlemen, take it away.
Thank you guys for hosting us. Just to do a quick poll here, you guys remind me, I've met Carl before, but who y'all are with and just what kinds of towers you're around, particularly medium intensity versus high intensity. It helps with the presentation. And we can start with whomever.
I'll start with that. I worked for Belden, the wire and cable manufacturer, and I left there a few years ago to focus on aviation career. So I'm a certified flight instructor. So when you talk about towers, I'm very cognizant of them because when you're out flying, you want to know where they are. And I see, I see the towers that are the strobe lights, the red lights. Sometimes I see towers that need painting. I've seen that. I was on vacation. I wasn't flying then. I drove up this one tower, and I said, "That thing's way overdue for paint." But and anyway, that's I hope that answered your question.
Okay. How about you, Christian?
I'm fresh into the engineering realm, we'll say. So right now I'm still getting into a different couple of companies at the moment. So right now I'm kind of still finding my way at the moment.
Okay. Mr. Sulecki?
Yes, nailed it. Nailed it. Yeah. I'm with Bob Selecki here, with WRTV Indianapolis, and we just got lighting last year.
That's not good.
Yeah.
Unless we're the one
Oh, it's
providing.
great.
Sometimes I lose track of the call numbers.
Ah, yeah, we've finally upgraded LED after their incandescents just kept burning out. Replaced the wiring, everything.
Okay. And Josh, how about you?
Used to be with Fox 59 and CBS 4. They're the Fox and CBS affiliates in Indianapolis. But for the past couple of years, I went to the dark side and work in integration. So don't get to spend as much time around towers as I'd like to, but I have been around towers. In
Okay.
fact, last tower job we did at the station was having a crew come out to grease the guy wires because that hadn't been done in a while, and they wanted to get that done.
Well, we're going to go a presentation with you. It's we could generally be done within the hour, and then you would record it. We'll send you a copy of the PDF, and it may get in the hands of some folks that haven't a strong need, or it may help you guys as you work your way through it. We're going to talk about a couple of different facets of it. One is we're going to talk about the regulatory side of it. Two, we're going to talk about the technology side of it, and thirdly, we're going to talk about a different way to get tower lighting that's different than anybody does out there, and it's a different way to think about it. I'm going to cover the first two spots, and then Jamie is going to cover the second. I'm Bear Poth. I'm the president and CEO of the company. I'm down here in Texas and just west of Austin, and that's where our company is headquartered. We provide something called tower lighting as a service, as well as all aspects of tower lighting, and we'll be covering a little bit of that. And we have over 1,000 towers, most of which we own the actual lighting system on the tower. So we are like you, tower owners, and that we own the lighting systems across the USA and almost all 50 states. So real strong presence there. Probably a third of our customers are in the media space.
Mm-hmm.
So we have a ton of experience with hundreds of both TV and radio obstruction lighting systems out there. And then Jamie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jamie Marsh. I am actually up here in New England. That's one thing I definitely could not handle is a Texas summer. So I said, yeah, I'll work with you, Bear, but I'm staying up here. So I prefer the cold weather, and I basically cover the whole northern half of the country. Although I've been working in the Midwest for probably about 25 years, even from New England. Matter of fact, the last position I had was actually a director of sales for a tower company in Des Moines, Iowa. I literally flew out there every week. That's how I knew about the Star Trek town over there in Iowa, because I went through every single Iowa town that they have out there. But either way, I've been working throughout the Midwest for almost my entire career, essentially. So got lots of contacts within that area out there, and frankly, just love kind of going out there. So,
Josh, you may want to let me share. I'm going to pull up a presentation. This will be distributed to everybody, and then the recording as well. So you guys will have this. You don't have to take any notes unless you want to. And then just jump in with any questions that you have.
You should be able to share.
Now, host disabled participant screen sharing.
Oh, come on. Multiple people. Let's see.
Yep, there. Now it worked.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. And so what I'm going to do is, my favorite letters is Control L with a PDF. Can you guys see that clearly?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this is a lighting system. It's a beacon we own. That's looking out towards Canada, so I know it's cold wherever that is. But we bought that for this is a communications company. Anything goes wrong, that we fix it. We provide full FAA monitoring compliance. That's kind of our bread and butter flagship product. But we also have different ways to deliver that. Um, if you think about you guys, y'all are some of the best engineers out there because you got to deal with facilities, you got to deal with power, you got to deal with internet protocol, you got to deal with social media now, and now you also, of course, have to deal with RF transceivers, which is the hard part. The average age, you guys are a very young group. The average age that we see in a SBE meeting, a good percentage of people are over 70 years old. Many of them have become consultants that are still getting dragged back in to go do the RF transceiver work. So y'all got a lot of stuff to do. And what our goal is to help people in regards to the tower lighting piece and educate and make sure you guys have full knowledge. We've done over 50 of these. We're SBE members. We've done them everywhere from the wood panel halls of WGBH in Boston Harbor to catfish parlors in Texas. And so we feel, and we've done quite a few by Zoom as well. These are the three areas that we're going to cover: regulation, technology, tower lighting. This is actually a media broadcaster customer of ours overlooking Salt Lake City with a real pretty view there. So we got lots of neat pictures from our closeout packages. The way tower lighting on the regulatory side is managed, for years up until 1972, the FCC had these legacy lighting standards. It was in a document that is all text-based. There was no pictures. In 72, they handed off the FAA to provide more clarity, and they began to create a circular called the AC 70 7460. We call it the 7460 for short. It started off with revision A. We're up to revision M as in Mary now. We're going to focus on the last two revisions, revision L, which has a couple of different changes, which came out in 2016 and got revised in 2018. And then the current circular standard, which is November of 2020. The view you're seeing here is a snapshot from our website. We have not only all of the different links to all the different circulars, but also, the ASR registration number, your different determination lookups, and then a whole library full of blogs on tower lighting, everything from the 7/8" rule, which we'll be talking about, to infrared, which we'll be talking about. And so a bunch more details. So our web page and our site is free. It's lumenserve.com. Go to it and just use it as a resource for your tower lighting. If you go to RevM, as I mentioned, this was effective in November of 2020. The biggest change is the addition of IR or infrared specs for LEDs. If you think about LED lighting, if you did not have night vision goggles, and I don't know if you wear them, Carl, or not, but a lot of the people in safety, public safety, border patrol, emergency rescue, that sort of stuff do. But if you look on the picture on the left, that's without night vision goggles. The picture on the right is with night vision goggles. So you have a lot more visibility there. Now, the lights that you see in all likelihood are probably incandescent lights that are putting off a heat signature. And the challenge with LED is the strength of an LED is it doesn't consume a lot of power, put off heat. So the problem is you can't see them very well. And so with if you look at it from sort of a physics perspective, the dotted line there is what the human eye can see from a wavelength perspective. And it can see, of course, the red lights that you see on the towers today. The problem is when you put the night vision goggles on with LEDs up there, you don't have the ability to see them. So what the FAA did in response to the safety risk assessment of LED lightings in aircraft operation, they established standards, and they basically have a requirement to output an infrared LED signal that you can see with night vision goggles. And you can see that's out there at a different wavelength. So if you got the night vision goggles on, you can see them. And so all new installed LEDs are required under the latest circular revision to have infrared. Okay, so you have to have infrared. And the way that was accomplished initially was to put an infrared module. And this is a typical dual mode beacon. So this is a beacon that's perhaps white during the day and red at night. And this is where you put an infrared module at the top. And by doing that, the naked eye operation stays the same, those lights, but the infrared for the night vision goggles, you got an IR output. And your form factor stays the same, minimal impact on power. And it's an easy way to kind of accomplish this requirement. This is some examples of integrated IR from the top, and you can see this one right here has got the IR emitter, and it's actually even got the little bubble in the middle for the leveling of the beacon that's centered in the middle of it. The other thing that's happened is on some of the beacons, there's also IR LEDs, and we'll talk about the technology here, but the technology that we're looking at has got 6 mirrors with LEDs that shine off that mirror, so it really minimizes light pollution. But then there's an ability to not only put white lights and red lights, but also LED lights on it as well as a way to output the IR piece. So if you look at circular M, which, we're talking about the major changes associated with that, most of them do not impact tower owners. There is, however, one major impact. Most of the things were around cranes and stuff like that. But the big impact is that if you have an existing LED system and you come in and you install a medium level LED system and you install it with an IR beacon, you also have to install a IR beacon at the top level as well. It must be replaced. So you can see if you had night vision goggles on and somebody had an old LED system pre-IR and they had to go repair a beacon at the mid-level and they put an IR beacon there, then that tower may look to be shorter than it actually is. And this is applicable for lighting under all your previous circulars. So you're grandfathered under your current circular, but this one overrides it because it's a safety hazard for the people wearing night vision goggles. So that is a gotcha. Question?
Yeah, that's interesting. I was not a I do not use night vision goggles, but I'm aware of that, and I have talked to crews on medevac helicopters, and they talk about using something like that when they're getting ready to land in a remote area, because they come in and land wherever the accident is.
Yeah.
And so that's very important. So I didn't realize that actually was an issue. So the old systems are grandfathered in. They don't have to upgrade, but if you do some upgrading, then you have to basically upgrade the top beacon too. Is
Yeah,
that what you're saying?
let me say it more clearly. So if you've got an incandescent system, it doesn't matter because those put off the heat signature. If you have
Right.
if you have an old system that's LED and you replace it with a new, or actually, if you have an old system of any sort and you replace it with a new LED system, top to bottom, then it has to have IR. Okay, so any new systems installed have infrared for your red lighting. Of course, if it's white day and white at night, that's not an issue. It's only for the red beacon, so it has to be one that has red beacons at night. If you have an existing LED system and you replace one of that's not IR, that's grandfathered in, and you replace one of the beacons at the mid level, you have to replace the top beacon as well with an IR beacon.
So for those towers that are doing white lights day and night, those are strobe lights and not LEDs. Is that what?
No,
what I'm hearing?
they're LEDs when we install those. The difference is the wavelength issue that you can't see with
Oh,
vision
okay.
goggles is the red lights.
The
And
red
that's
lights don't show up on
that,
the NVGs. Okay.
yeah, that one slide where I was showing the wavelengths, this guy right here, Carl.
Yeah,
This one right here that you can see with the naked eye. When you put the
mhm.
night vision goggles on, you cannot see that piece, so they output an IR where you can see it more clearly. You can
So
see the white lights. You can see the white lights with the night vision goggles.
the white lights have a broad spectrum, so they show up in the NVGs. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And does the IR portion of that only work at night? Does it
Yeah,
or is it work? Okay,
it works in tandem with the red light.
okay, gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so that's the main thing for circular M is the IR piece. If you go to circular L, there's a lot more meat to it. So there's some things to learn about tower lighting there that I think is interesting. The first thing is way back in 2012, the FAA did a study on bird fatalities, and they found that the solid red lights attract birds. So you still see these Christmas tree looking things with solid red lights on them. And that's impacting the avian population. They'd fly into them. And if it was a flashing light, they wouldn't. So they asked that people move to what's called the avian standard. And so what ended up happening is if you look at the old lighting diagrams out there, this is pre-revision L of the circular. You can see, and let's take this example here of an E2 tower. It would have solid burning lights at the 1/4 and the 3/4 level. Okay. And the E1 tower And an E2 tower, by the way, is white day, red at night, and it was less than 500 feet. And in the new standard, it transformed, and now it's anything less than 700 feet. And then the solid burning lights at the 1/4 and the 3/4 are removed. Okay, that same thing happened to most all of the other towers that had solid burning lights. Is when you upgrade to Rev L or Rev M, you can roll to the avian standard and actually remove lights. The exception is on a couple of towers. One example is with the E1 tower, and that is these lights stayed. So they were there pre-Rev L, and they're there Rev L, but now they are configured to flash in synchronicity with the red beacon on top. So it becomes a flashing light, which mitigates the avian issue with it. So the good news is there's a government study done, and for the first time in history, maybe it actually eliminated regulation, and it eliminated these lights right here on these types of towers. You see the same thing on the painted towers. Now, if you're driving around and you see solid lights out there, that means it's under an older revision. And one of the things we do a lot of is roll people up to not only the newer revision and with the avian standard there, and it eliminates those as part of the upgrade to the new LED lighting system. Now, the other thing I mentioned is that now this is no longer 500 feet, it's 700 feet. So it used to be anything greater than 500 feet required high intensity lighting. And, just to put it in relative spectrum strength, a medium intensity light is 20,000 candela white light, and a high intensity is 200,000. So it's radically different in terms of the amount of power and the amount of energy consumption and the amount of capital expenditure, et cetera. So now the folks that were between 500 and 700 feet, they have the ability to roll to the medium intensity, which is an opportunity to save money. And there's still some people out there in that range that still have high intensity lights, although there's not very many left anymore. Most people have made that change because of the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, so if you've been around towers a long time, you might come across a lot that are at $499, and that's kind of the main reason right there. They ended up saving a lot of money if they didn't have to go over 500, because back then, as Bear said, you had to do high intensity lights. So there's a small niche of towers that are between 500 and 700 that still have that old high intensity or strobes or something. They can actually save money by going to the new standard.
Mm-hmm. I remember when the bird issue became a concern, and and they were concerned about birds, running into the towers and stuff like that. And I guess it became an issue with the wind generators too. So I remember that. Yeah, before I worked at Belden, I worked in broadcasting. So yeah, the studio tower was 190 feet, so it didn't have to have any lighting or painting.
There's a lot of 199-foot ones too.
Yeah.
So the LEDs, we monitor those out there with SNMP and also dry contacts. This is an example of our gateway, which we'll talk a little bit about later, but it can monitor any kind of tower. It's got a little battery in there, so if you don't have battery backup, it gives you visibility for a couple hours. So, and then it does all kinds of different ways to check on the lighting system there. And the reason why that's out there is there is a requirement under Rev L to also do quarterly inspections on your voltage. So it says to ensure proper candela output for fixtures on incandescent lamps, the voltage provided in the lamp should not vary more than plus or minus 3%. And then for strobes, it's plus or minus 10%. Of course, this is all negated with the new technology where you're able to get these kinds of readings. So we're able to go up to a tower at night and push a button on your iPhone and run it through a quarterly inspection, day mode to night mode, making sure everything's properly running. All the things are checked out okay, and get a checklist on it. And then we take an 8-second video of it and put it into the logbook. So it's a real thorough review of the lighting system by doing this LED monitoring with the lighting system. One of the other little things in Rev L that a lot of people don't know about is prior to Rev L, basically the language says, hey, you can't obstruct any of your lights with an appurtenance. So, and it was vague about it, but starting in Rev L, it said the widest appurtenance, lightning rod, or antenna that can be placed in front of an obstruction light, and talking about the beacons now, without significantly blocking the obstruction visibility, should be no wider than 7/8 of an inch. So if you look at the picture on the left, y'all have seen this before. This is called a nested array, where you got a obstruction light that's inside of an array of cellular antennas. And obviously that creates an obstruction. Those are much more than 7/8 inch, but you may also have some type of whip antennas or lightning rods or something that are greater than that. And there's really only, and this is the example for the L810s. These are the side lights. You can have nothing obstructing them. So you have to be able to see at least one of these with no obstruction 360 degrees around it. So you couldn't have a big whip antenna on this one. The way you solve the problem is really a couple different ways. The first way no one likes, that's to take the obstruction away. And we've had customers do that. They may have an old antenna that they don't need anymore, and they say, well, will you take the antenna down? And we do that. The second way is to put a beacon extension on it, which is where you raise the beacon up above the obstruction. And we generally don't do that for more than about 6 feet because of serviceability, but we certainly do that in some instances. Sometimes these arrays are good opportunities to make those kinds of changes. And the third way to do it is to do what's called a +1. And a +1 is where you have 2 beacons on it. And so in a situation like the one in the middle where you have obstructions, that would be a good opportunity to position 2 beacons such that you have 360 degrees around it. You can also put those 2 beacons at any point from the top of the tower down 10 feet. So in this cellular array there, you could potentially solve this problem by either a beacon extension, or if that was not going to work from a serviceability standpoint, by putting 2 beacons down below the array there. And it's where you get 360. The key is to make sure you don't have any obstructions greater than 7/8 of an inch for a beacon and to solve that problem. We see this issue a lot. We have a lot of public safety customers. These are sheriff's departments, police departments, and whatnot. And you see a lot of those types of antennas at the top where we have the opportunity to come in and mitigate this issue with a +1 or a beacon extension. So that's called the 7/8 inch rule. And just like I said earlier, there's a blog on a lot of these topics out there. So if you really want to dig into them, if you go to LumenServe.com, you'll see that. Here's an example of one of our things that we've seen out there in our customer
That's
base.
the before shot. Make sure they know it's the before shot.
Yeah, this is definitely
after.
this is the before shot. So we came in, and this is one where it's got a lot of folks wanting that vertical real estate up there with a single beacon, and this one was solved with a +1 beacon put at an elevation such that you could see 360 degrees around it. As you can see with this many up there, that you could have an obstruction issue, a bunch of them greater than 7/8 of an inch. So another little item on the regulatory side that is interesting that came up in Rev L is a requirement to do a biennial lens inspection. And biennial means every 2 years. And the language says, due to the harsh effects, environments, light fixture lenses should be vision inspected every 24 months, or when the light fixture fails for ultraviolet damage, cracks, crazing, dirt buildup, etc., to ensure the certified light put has not been deteriorated. And it should, if you have these issues, they need to be cleaned or replaced. And what you see is examples out there. And so the one on the left is an example of one that appears to have crazing on it, where there was a time when the plastics that were used for some of these beacons and whatnot would do a lot like your headlights do on your car, or they used to do. And you've seen how they frost over. The one below that is probably a better example of that, and that's where you're seeing the heat or whatnot from the light itself causing the plastic to outgas and create crazing on the inside. The one on the top right is an example of just a broken beacon. It could have got hit by falling ice or something. And this beacon on the bottom right, it's in we have a little museum of different ones that we put up in our, that we've seen and we pulled down. This light was actually flashing. It was out in West Texas. It was flashing every 30 seconds. So it's still working, believe it or not, with this configuration, with clearly a damaged lens, and it's an old xenon type bulb that's out there. So this
it's a small crack. It'll buff out.
Nothing duct tape can't fix.
Exactly.
So what we do is we actually have a military drone pilot, or a former military drone pilot, and we go to each one of these and we do a lens inspection on it, and circle around it with the drone, and we catalog that and put that in the logbook. The biggest issue that we find, guys, is bird poop. And if it's an area that continues to be an issue, we'll put bird spikes on it to create a deterrent to it. And we've got some bird spike technologies that are helpful.
That
Okay.
reminds me of I think it was on a NASA mission. They had something they saw on the space shuttle or something, and after thorough examination, they finally decided that's what it was.
Bird poop.
Yeah, somehow on the launch pad it had gotten that on it, and they were concerned about the tile, and they thought, oh, we got a damage spot, but they
Yeah.
decided it was okay. But when you said about that voltage check, is that the voltage at the light fixture, or is that into the system?
It's coming from the controller to the light fixture. It's what the light receives.
Okay, so your system is set up to actually monitor the voltage at the fixture.
Yeah, well, it's monitoring the voltage that's going to the output to the fixtures.
Okay,
And,
okay.
and the other thing that it's set up for is the LED systems, Carl, are set up such that you can have 25% failure and still be in spec. And so it's looking for that. Now, typically you don't see that because the actual LED component itself is rock solid, but it looks for that 25% threshold. But there's a whole series of SNMP data that it's checking, everything from the 25% threshold to the current to the transition from day mode to night mode. And what it does is it gives you a little report card with a check mark, so everything's good. And we screenshot that. We also take an 8-second video because when you do your quarterly lighting inspections, you're supposed to be on site to do that. And we have our system set up to where when we go out and we do, I think we did almost 3,000 quarterly lighting inspections in 2024. I remember that from our presentation. There's a bunch of them. And we have our system built up such that we have a lat long that we go to, and we take this 8-second video. Now, certain systems like the high intensity ones, we have to go to multiple points because they have different arrays and whatnot. The biggest challenge is people reporting your lighting system out because they're not used to seeing the new technology with the lower lighting pollution, which I'm about to talk about. And you'll see some diagrams here in just a second. But yeah, we're checking all that stuff, Carl, to make sure. And you mentioned earlier, Carl, about the paint inspections. So the way the paint works is it's interesting. The requirements for that are actually in a couple of places. At the bottom, you see FCC Title 47. It says intended structures requiring painting under this part shall be cleaned or repainted as often as necessary to maintain good visibility. Evaluation of current paint status shall be made using the FAA's in-service aviation orange tolerance chart. So these little charts are little paint cards, and I've got one, but you can't see it with the way the Zoom works, but you can see an example above it. We have a paint card loaner program for people. These cards cost, I don't know, $35 to $50, depending on the quantity you're buying. But we'll loan it to you, and we'll send it with a return envelope if you want to paint yours. The painting is the most expensive or the most highest increased inflation-wise of anything I've seen in almost any industry ever. It has really shot through the roof. When we first started our business back in 2015, 10 years ago now, we were, using $20 a foot for, linear foot maybe or less even for a guide tower. We're seeing that now at 2, 3, and oftentimes more than 4 times that, so more than $80 a foot. So when you hold your card up, you're supposed to hold it at the midpoint or higher of the tower. And it's either a pass or fail scenario. You can see a couple of examples there. And what's really interesting is we've created something called Never Paint Your Tower Again, which is to take your painted tower and move it over to dual mode, so you can avoid, the concerns of fines and the cost now of, $50 plus per linear foot, depending on your tower configuration and location. And with Never Paint Your Tower Again, what we do is we take an A-style tower, And so here's the latest picture on the left-hand side of all the A-style towers. So A-style towers are painted towers. This is the latest picture because you don't see any of the solid burning sidelights there that we talked about earlier, other than for the A1 down there, you see them, and those flash in synchronicity with the top beacon like we talked about. But it does have these long runs, and you have alternating aviation orange and white paint. You need to keep it painted. We find that on average, when you go run these checks on this, that this typically lasts about 7 years. That's an average of averages. It could be very different in a salty environment or a sand, West Texas sand environment or something like that. And what we do is we move it over to an E-style tower. And so with our approach, we'll come in and we'll actually do all the work for you. We'll, do the FAA filings. We will switch. We will buy the lighting system. We'll take your old system down. We'll move it to an E-style tower, and then you won't have to paint it anymore. So in this instance, if you were under the old revision of E2, so if you were under this one right here where you used to have the sidelights on it, and let's say you had an old incandescent system or an old xenon or even an old LED system, and you had and it was a painted tower. Okay, so it's painted. Would be an A2 actually. We would move it to an E2, which not only do you not have the sidelights there anymore, not only do you have all the savings associated with LEDs, but you also don't have to paint it, and it's LED compliant, and it's also got the new IR lights on it. So,
Sorry, Barry, and you're also not subject to that paint inspection anymore. And as he just showed you on a previous page, you can no longer just walk up to the base. So now any real paint inspection has to have a climb involved.
Yeah.
Yeah. Before I worked at Belton, I worked at broadcasting, and I remember getting some of those colors, some type of color standard card, kind of like that,
Card,
to
yeah.
check the paint color. But I know, yeah, painting the tower back then was, of course, that's many years ago. It was like 1,000-foot tower, and I think it was $10,000. But I'm sure that's cheap by today's standards
Yeah,
for a 1,000-footer.
you can't see this card I've got.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
There
maybe
you go. There you go.
Yeah, it was like
up
that.
here.
Yeah, and you'd hold up the tower and compare the colors.
Yeah. Now, what's interesting about these, Carls, is on the back, it's got a service date on it, and they only last for a year. It says replace 1 year after
Oh,
service
really?
date. And the reason why is just like anything else, if you're out using it, it fades. And so what you don't want to have is a card that's fading, using it to check a tower that's fading. So that's kind of interesting.
You got to pass every time.
Shelf life, yeah.
So anyway, that's called Never Paint Your Tower Again, and that's something that we offer, and it's going from typically an A-style tower to typically an E-style tower. Now, so here's the compliance checklist. So this is a kind of a guideline. We have a poster that Jamie will talk to you about that's got this on it. But your quick compliance checklist is monitor your lighting system, and upon a qualifying outage, ensure you have a notice to air emissions filed with the FAA within 30 minutes. Keep a daily monitoring log. Keep compliance logs on file for at least 2 years. Do the on-site quarterly inspections that I was talking about. The biennial lens inspections, if you're Rev L or Rev M. And then the paint inspections if you still have a painted tower. So we do all of these services as part of our full FAA monitoring and compliance piece that there are different ways to do that, and we'll talk about that. So are there any questions about the lighting regulation piece of it before I get into the technology?
Before I leave the paint subject, if you have a tower and the paint is like fading, chipping or whatever off, and you don't have a reason to repaint it, from the FAA standpoint, can you just change it to an unpainted tower and let the paint just go away and be okay?
Fade
or
away.
do you have to, fade away, or do you have to remove the paint to have it?
You leave the paint, and it will help protect your tower even more. You would not
Right.
do it unless you have a galvanized tower, which 98%
Right.
more.
Yeah.
So if you have a galvanized tower that was previously painted, style A, and you move it, Carl, over to an E-style tower, you leave the paint there. And so sometimes you will see a tower and you say, wait a minute, that tower is painted aviation orange, but it's flashing white lights during the day and red lights at night. And that's one that went through the Never Paint Your Tower Again program.
Well, actually, the station where I worked had the 1,000-foot tower was somehow I think they made a mistake. It was actually ended up being painted and and also had the white strobe lights day and night. So it actually had both. And I don't think it was intended, but I think the tower manufacturer somehow they painted it. So it actually didn't need painting, but it
Yeah.
had paint.
And you see lots of interesting stuff out there for sure.
Yeah.
All the
Um,
stuff, all the stuff I see around where I live right now, there aren't any tall towers, but there are, like cell towers. So you see all the galvanized, unpainted, white light. That's pretty much standard for everything I see around here for the most part.
okay.
So before we jump on to the next section here, I'm just kind of curious. I always like to ask this when we do these meetings, is from what he just went over, all those new regulations and compliance requirements, did anyone here know all of those? Did anyone, I always like to find out if anyone learned something over that last, 15 minutes or so.
I did not think about the infrared issue with the
Mhm.
night vision goggles. Like I
Okay.
mentioned, the medevac helicopters, they land out in remote areas and they look for,
Mhm.
used some type of NVGs. Uh, so I didn't know about that. I didn't know about that. And then the thing about the lenses, that was something, which makes sense, keep them in good repair, but I didn't realize there was
Yeah.
specific,
Requirements.
inspection required for that. So those are two things I learned new today.
Good.
So here's
Bob,
a
did you
question
learn
about
anything?
something about listening to you guys, something I learned. The question about it is when you talk about taking a tower from an A style to an E style, is that something you could also do with like a candelabra style tower?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if those had different rules or not. Just
Yeah.
because Wish TV here in town, I've noticed driving in because I live on the west side of Indianapolis and I live far enough out where I can see the towers as I'm driving into town. And I've
Mhm.
noticed that Wish has been using the white beacons on the during the day, and I always thought that was kind of weird, and that's why I was asking was because I didn't know if they went through that same program or what. But I noticed that and they have a candelabra style tower.
Is the
Yeah.
tower painted aviation orange and white?
I don't believe it is. No,
It was,
I
it was,
honestly hadn't thought
it
about
was,
that part.
it
Go
was
ahead.
probably original determination of a dual mode tower, white day, red at night. It's not white at night either, is it?
I haven't paid much attention at night. It was just
Yeah.
noticing it in the day. Like it sticks out to me in the daytime just because you don't typically see flashing beacons on in the daytime.
So what that one was is it was originally determined probably as a white day, red at night, and it's just the way it's configured. And
Yeah.
if it's greater than 700 feet, it's going to be high intensity, which is you're going to really see those lights during the day.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, and
And we,
where I live at west, it actually, Bob, I've seen it. I've seen it more on the north side of Brownsburg than anywhere else, looking east towards the city. But yeah, you can look out there and see the intense lights.
and we have a candelabra, University of Wisconsin, right? Do I remember that right, Bear? I think it's Wisconsin has that candelabra one.
Yep,
Yep.
we do. Okay,
Excellent.
keep going here. Let's go into the technology piece of it. Um, so lighting technology, this is an example of a beacon there. You can see that curved mirror there. We're going to talk about the technology somewhat. There's three basic kinds. Incandescent, which is what Edison invented. Xenon is a gas filled, emits a blue, lavender, or white glow. And then LED, which is a semiconductor light source. It's the highest luminous efficacy. And we'll talk some about that. Here's a variety of different kinds of lighting systems out there. You see some hybrid systems. You see some early LED systems. You see the one on the left is the original incandescent technology that a lot of people see out there. I've got one of these in my backyard. They're neat little things. That's probably Huey Phillips design. It's got a couple of 600 some odd watt bulbs in it. The one on the bottom right is a newer technology, LED technology that we utilize. Some of the negatives associated with incandescence, high power consumption, short life, just some of the mechanical issues. It's also poor optical control and light pollution, which we'll talk about. This is an example of xenon strobes that are out there. They have a longer lifespan, better energy consumption than incandescent, but they're more expensive and it's an older technology. There can be some other issues associated with those. And you can see, if you've seen these examples, these are for high intensity greater than 700 feet applications. In terms of LEDs, they're the smallest light source available. This ROHS is an environmental standard. There's nothing fragile in regards to glass or filaments. There's nothing corrodable. and it's got the shock and vibration resistance and long life aspects. This is an interesting slide when you look at the luminous efficacy is basically the lumens per watt. So it's how much light you get for the amount of power that you're inputting. And there was a big inflection point starting in 2006. And where you see that arrow, that's when you began to see almost all of the new obstruction lighting systems go to LED. And now you see that, across all different forms of lighting, including in your home and whatnot. I pulled some data. I was just interested in this. You'll see the source is Wikipedia, so you can tell I developed this slide. It says incandescent is about 25 lumens per watt. That's that luminous efficacy or efficiency that we're talking about. The compact fluorescent is about 75. So you guys may remember those. We still have a few of those hanging out in various spots around our house, or in one of our refrigerators we have one. That's the old screw in. It's got the little ballast in the bottom. Then you have linear fluorescence, which they've had since we were all growing up, and you still see some of those out there. And then metal halide and high pressure sodium, you see a lot of those in arenas or different athletic events. And then you get to LEDs and you're at 300. So you have 300 lumens per watt versus 25. So there's a huge difference. And that's one of the two reasons why these systems are so much more efficient. There's two reasons why. It's not just because of the basic technology. And the second reason has to do with the architecture. And here's some examples of the lighting evolution in terms of the size. You can see how big they were back. This is the beginning of that inflection curve there for this dual mode 2007 to the current models, which are much smaller. So you have less, not only weight on your tower, but less wind loading on your tower, and obviously less energy consumption. So we talked about light pollution. So the systems that we mostly install are manufactured by Dowlite, which is the first AA certified LED back in 1999. And what this is, the technology here is that if you take one of these beacons, it actually has these curved mirrors on it, and it shines the light really out towards the aircraft. And so if you're sitting below it, the photograph on the bottom right, is an example of one that's showing a lot of light pollution. You would not typically see that with the technology that we're seeing. In fact, if you turn up a new E1 or E2 tower, a lot of times you have to walk a few football fields away, or sometimes even drive your car a mile or two away before you can see the light. And so that's one of the issues that we get is people say, hey, Joe Bob, your light's not working. And we're like, and Joe Bob will call us and say, it's working. And have your person, go to a different angle, and they'll see that they can see it more efficiently because of the light pollution. So with light pollution being minimized, that's a benefit for the community. There's less light because you don't need to see it in your bedroom. You need to see it in the cockpit. And there's a graph down there that shows that. But I said there were two main reasons why LED lighting is more efficient. The first is the luminous efficacy that we talked about. It's just LEDs are much more efficient. You get a lot more wattage for the light that comes out, and a lot more efficient. But the other thing is that for a typical beacon, like if you go back to this old beacon on the far left right here, this is an omnidirectional beacon largely. Now it has Fresnel curvature lenses on the side of it that, like an old lighthouse, that try to push the light towards your eye, but it's still very omnidirectional in nature, okay? And that's very different because if you look at this technology, it pushes the light where it's needed, out towards the aircraft. So if you ask the question, if you're in a room and you're looking for the least expensive way to read a book, one way to do it is to take the bulb, at the center of the room at the top and change it from incandescent to LED. But a more efficient way to do it is to take a little LED reader light, the ones that clip on your book, and take that and point it at the page. And that way you're using LED technology, which is more efficient, and you're pointing it at the place that it needs it. And that's the two reasons why this technology is more efficient. And when you see these LED beacons installed, like the one on the top, the far right here, this is actually, I know this one very well. This is KOAT in Albuquerque. My wife's from Albuquerque, and her mom's house is down there in the bottom right of that picture. But when you open these things up, these are dumb beacons on the inside. There's no intelligence. There's a surge protection and some LEDs, which is great because you got all your intelligence down low. And so it's less expensive to maintain those things. So the basic system is you're running power up to the top. And you've got LEDs up there with a little surge protector. There is a special way and a special cable for these that are properly grounded in a way to mitigate surge and lightning issues. So there's grounding. And this picture right here is actually a picture that would be taken as part of our closeout package. And whenever we go and do an installation, we have software where photos are taken along the way, and we share a link with our customers so they get real-time pictures of all the installation, including every connection and every mounting and every aspect of that installation that's out there. These are examples of high intensity ones. So high intensity arrays are a little bit different. So these are the ones greater than 700 feet. And what you'll see is at each level, you can see some pictures right here in that one, is you'll see an array. You'll have 3 arrays at each level, and each array will have 3 elements. So that means that each array has, 1/3 of the 360 degrees, so 120 degrees, and then each element has 1/3 of that, so 40 degrees. But then there's overlap associated with that. And that's the way to do it. So you go from this old xenon box there to this new array here. And of course, these are the ones that have infrared built into them. And you can see the ice shields and, how these things are configured up there. So for very efficient, high intensity LED arrays that are out there. The other impact is from an ecological perspective. So depending on what you're comparing it to, if you take an old incandescent system and you compare it to LEDs, you can see up to a 90% reduction in your electrical expenses. You have a lot less light pollution. You don't have the issues of bulb changes, because let's say you have to go change a bulb. So somebody gets in a truck and they run out to the site. Maybe they traveled several hundred miles, and let's say it's a bad day weather-wise, so they got to go stay in a motel, and then they got to climb next day. They'll take the bulbs down. You got to go throw that in a trash can. And the trash man takes it in. All that kind of stuff all gets minimized from that perspective. So that's a summary of the technological side of it and the regulatory side of it. And before I hand it to Jamie, let's see if there's any questions.
I can testify to the issues with the xenon, because that's what was on that 1,000-foot tower I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It just seems like you're constantly calling for repair service, because the system we had within those boxes was a circuit board, the electronics and stuff. And it just seemed like every few months you'd call and, hey, we need service. Something's not working. So
well, if you look at the cost to go do a bulb change or climb a tower now, it's pretty expensive. And what Jamie's going to talk to you about is a different way to think about lighting, completely different way of thinking about it. And it may be something you haven't heard of, but I'm going to let him do roll there with that. And
good.
Go ahead, Jamie. Whenever you want to do slide, just say next.
Yep, no problem. So sounds good. Great background on all that. I don't know, Bob, I'm really interested to hear kind of your experience just going through this whole concept. Just last year, I think you said, versus some of the things that Bear talked a little bit, and perhaps some of the way that we are looking at doing things here today and kind of, I don't know, throwing it all on its head here a little bit, essentially. So took everything that he just talked about and kind of put that into consideration for number one, maintaining your tower lighting and everything that's involved with that, but B, actually going out and getting a new. So again, Bob just kind of went through this whole project himself, having to put a new system on after a lot of bulb changes with an old incandescent system for years. Well, kind of everything going through that, I'm sure at some point in time for each one of you guys, maybe not Christian, because he said he's just kind of getting into it, but for everybody else, I'm sure you've been involved at one point or another with some of these and been on some of those phone calls. So what we tried to do is take a look at this and figure out, is there a better way to kind of do that? So we came up with something we call Tower Lighting as a Service, or TLAS for short. And basically, we're the only ones in the world that have it. We kind of came up with the concept, and we're the first, and again, as far as we know, the only ones that actually do that as a service. I'm going to explain a little bit more what that is. Go ahead, Bear. So as Bear mentioned, I've been in business well over 10 years. And as you can see by some of the logos out there, We've actually made a substantial covering across the U.S. Bear already mentioned it earlier, but we're on well over 1,000 towers across this country right now. But one thing for us is all we do is tower lighting. So this isn't just a subdivision of something else. We're not trying to get I don't know, a fiber project out of some of our customers or do some, line sweeping on your tower, or anything like that. That's not at all we do. All we do is tower lighting. We do it very well. And so that makes us the expert at it, as Bear mentioned earlier, with our website having all kinds of great information when it comes to this information. But you can see if you look at some of these different logos, maybe you recognize some of them a little bit. Some of them are national, some of them are going to be local. But for us, it doesn't matter the industry. We're not just relying on, media as an example, which you guys are all involved with. And of course, it doesn't matter the tower size. So I talk to people pretty much weekly that have a little 50-footer, just so happens to be in proximity of an airport. So either the FAA says they have to put a light on it, the airport themselves has to put in a light on it, or I've talked to people where they just do it out of good conscience, essentially. Or some of these big giant, 2,000 footers that you see with multiple levels of high intensity lighting, as Bear mentioned a little bit earlier. So again, doesn't matter the size, doesn't matter the industry. We've got a solution for it, essentially. Go ahead, Bear.
Yes.
Next. So here's a static version, and let's see, what's today, Tuesday? It's probably already out of date this week. We literally are out there installing new towers every single week, new systems out there, and with 100% retention rate, we're just constantly adding more dots into it. I would love to be able to zoom in and show you Indiana, but you can see by the number of dots out there, we can't even show you that from the 40,000 foot view here, essentially. But right in and around your area, we've got a number of Moody Bible sites. Maybe some of the other ones are a little bit smaller, independent, that you've heard of. Iron Horse Broadcasting, I don't know if anyone knows the guys over there, or DLC Media. Shake Broadcasting in Upper Wabash is actually two smaller ones that just came on board a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, if I remember correctly. But those are kind of smaller ones that are in and around your area, but again, are very specifically have to do with media side as well too. But again, because we don't restrict ourselves just to that industry, just to the east of you guys, I don't know exactly where everybody lives here around the Indy area, how big your SBE chapter is. If anyone lives over in Randolph County, but we work with their EMS folks and run a number of their towers. And NIPSCO, when you go up north for energy, as far as that's concerned, and they actually just added a few more to it as well too. So we've got a number of folks that have been with us for a long time, and they continue to come with us. They continue to renew with us. So hopefully that tells us that we're doing a pretty darn good job.
Yeah, Randolph County is just north of a few miles from my house.
Just from your house? Okay. Have you ever
Yeah.
seen any of their towers?
Yeah, I get up in Randolph County from time to time. You mentioned Moody. Is that Moody Radio?
Moody Bible
Yeah.
Institute.
Yeah, their radio stations.
Yeah, and they have a few. There's a few in Indiana, but we have some in some other states as well too. We've been working with those guys for quite a while, actually. But the point of this map, going back to it, even though it's quote unquote out of date, the point of this map here is that we're literally looking at each one of these. And Bear mentioned about our SNMP connectivity into any different lighting system and all the subsystems involved. Basically, if you see every one of those dots, we're pinging them every 5 minutes. We know the status of course, not just if the light's on or off, of course, but all those subsystems that Bear talked about before. So we know the FAA does require to have a monitoring system. And of course, they have a 30-minute window where they require you to report an outage, right? As a NOTAM, you've probably all kind of gone through that at some point in your careers. But if we're pinging it every 5 minutes and we know something's wrong with it and we try to fix it remotely and automatically, if we can't do that within that 30-minute, we make sure you're on that NOTAM list, essentially. So everyone is always staying in FAA compliance when it comes to us. Go ahead, Bear, next. So some folks, and Bob, you may have gone through this when you started that project. I don't know how long that project took for you, but you might have gone through a little bit of something like this. We'll talk to people all the time, especially like a small radio station that might say, hey, I relamp once every 18 months. It's really, and it's incandescent. It's really not that big of a deal. It doesn't cost us that much. But when I start to ask a whole number of questions about tower climbs and maintenance and, what is that when the price of gas jumped up over, $5 a few years ago, what did that do to your budget? Those type of things. How much time do you spend on the phone organizing this? Trying to make sure that everything is in RMA compliance. Like if you have an outage with your system, and now you got to deal with a warranty manufacturer, or maybe just like another tower climb, you got to arrange that RMA. all the stuff that goes into it. So you see a number of items here at the bottom. Some may apply to you, some may not. But when you really sit down and factor in what your current tower lighting system is costing you today, which again, this is kind of the main way we started this whole concept to think that there's got to be a better way than doing all this and what this costs you. Go ahead, Bear. It's funny when somebody else is driving it. So when you think about what everything costs you and all the time and the effort and money you're putting into it, plus all the compliance things that Bear just talked about, that I think most of you guys admitted you learned something here or there that has to be maintained on a daily, monthly, quarterly, yearly basis, whatever that is from the FAA. When you factor all that into it, go ahead, Bear, then you come up with a better way of actually doing things. So that's kind of the approach that we went to and say, is there a better approach for it, which is where your tower lighting as a service kicks in. Go ahead, Bear. So TLAS, as we mentioned before, is kind of made up of these four icons that you see right here. And of course, a quote from some guy I think I've heard of here on the right-hand side. But basically what TLAS really entails are the top two, the icon at the top, the one at the bottom, and the one at my left. I think it's your left as well too. The one on the right I'll talk about here in just a minute. But basically we came up with the idea, and again, not to keep picking on Bob, it's just that he mentioned that he has a new system that he just went through this whole project recently. And I would love to hear again in detail what he did. But in our case, what we do is it's one phone call. We talk to the people and we say, okay, we got it from this point forward. We go out, we buy the lighting system. You don't have to. We'll pay for the lighting system. We will install that lighting system, so you don't have to worry about trying to find someone for a tower climb. And oh, by the way, we'll completely decom that old system as well too. We're running new power from the ground up on anything medium intensity, of course. So you're starting from scratch from the ground all the way up. On the left-hand side where it says assurance warranty, so after we've paid for it, we've installed it, we took care of it. On the left-hand side where it says assurance warranty, basically at that point now, if anything goes wrong with it, this is not just your liaison between you and the lighting manufacturer. Bear mentioned that we use Dialight for most of our installations. We're not just helping you communicate with Dialight on an RMA or a warranty issue. This is if anything goes wrong with it. We're talking about a lightning strike. We're talking about vandalism. We're talking about anything that would cause that lighting system to not function 100% the way it's supposed to work. Our job to fix it. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to make a phone call. We already know something's wrong before you do. And we're going to make sure we handle it. And then, of course, on the bottom there is that FAA compliance that Bear spent a lot of time earlier in this call discussing. So all those rules and regulations that everybody and every tower is subject to, we handle all of that for you, including NOTA management as well, too. And we do all of that for a monthly fee. So instead of, again, spending a lot of time figuring out what's the right lighting system for you, who's going to install it for me, how am I going to handle warranty issues, all that goes away. And for not even thinking about paying for a new system, you simply pay a monthly fee. And my favorite part about this whole thing is that we guarantee your monthly fee will stay exactly the same for the next 5 years. So we enter in a 60-month, 5-year agreement with you where you don't have to even think about your lighting system. Whatever your payment comes out to be, we guarantee no matter what happens with outside influences, we just went through an election that changes things. We have inflation, supply chain issues, all these crazy things that have been happening the last few years. Our customers have been insulated from all of them. They didn't have to worry that a tower climb is now 1.5 times it was 8 months ago when they called for a tower climb. That all goes away with our system. And then even better, again, in my opinion, is that when the renewal time comes, you know already exactly what you're going to pay for that too. So it stays flat for those 5 years. And starting at year 6, if you decided to simply do a 12-month renewal going forward, you add 4% to whatever you were paying. So it makes life really easy. It's 4% per year starting at year 6, or we do multi-year renewals and it'll be even better deal. But that allows people to literally, when they get a quote from us, they can tell what they're going to pay, from the time everything is installed that month to the 10th month to 7 years down the road to 13 years down the road. You know exactly what you're going to pay and you know how to budget that way out there. It gives our guys a lot of peace of mind. The one on the right-hand side, though, which I didn't mention, is an optional service. That's the only reason I didn't mention it with our TLAS program. That's all those inspection parts that Bear talked about as well. So even though in our case, we're monitoring every 5 minutes, we know exactly the state of every subsystem, the voltage tolerances, that is a requirement, all those things we talked about. The FAA still requires you to come out there once a quarter, put it through its paces and prove it with video and all that kind of thing. Make sure you're not in violation of that 7/8 rule that Bear talked about. Make sure you're doing those biennial lens inspections. Everything that they require out there, we do it as well as an optional service. Go ahead, Bear. Now, the way I just described everything is our flagship TLAS product. That's the one you see over in the left-hand side. And if you think about it, the way you go through that program that we have over there, where again, we pay for the system, you're not putting any money down up front, you're not writing a quote unquote big check, let us do that. And this could be even if you have 10 towers, it makes no difference, it's the same boat. But if you think of it that way, you never own the equipment. But we also understand some people do want to own the equipment. Most people don't want to own equipment. They just want to meet the FAA guidelines and do what they got to do and not think about it. But some people do like to own the equipment. Nothing wrong with that. The other two are kind of that traditional way of actually owning the equipment. The one on the right-hand side where it says purchase and install services, that is that traditional approach where you pay for that system up front, you own it from day one. But of course, you could have us do all that services we just talked about, that assurance warranty, the compliance and monitoring piece, even those optional on-site inspections. But as you can imagine, your monthly fee is going to be less because you own the equipment. We're just bringing the services piece to you. And then the one in the middle is kind of in between. You want to own the equipment, you just don't like writing those big CapEx checks. You'd rather kind of break it off. So in the middle, we have a TLAS with a $1 buyout, just like the TLAS flagship product that I mentioned, no money down. The only difference in this one is that your monthly fee is higher. That's because you're capitalizing the equipment over that 5 years. By the end of the 5 years, you now own it. Of course, if you chose to renew, that's when your payment drops way down because now you're kind of in that other boat where you own the equipment and we're just providing the services there for you. And again, no matter what we do is guaranteed that whatever year comes out to be, whichever option, we guarantee you know your price today, tomorrow, and 20 years down the road if you want to figure that out. Bear, next, please. Now, for some of you guys, you may have a great lighting system, or it's not really giving you that much trouble. Even if you go back to that page and where I talked about what is truly costing you, if you do that evaluation, you say, well, we're actually in pretty good shape. Or maybe we did install one, 10 years ago or whatever it might be. Well, we actually have a package that we just introduced in the beginning of last year. So it's about a year old or so, because people kept asking us, I love what you do. I really need help on the compliance side, all the daily requirements that are done. I really need help on the inspection side. But I don't want to buy a new light. I just put one on 5 years ago. I don't really need it. So we came up with what we call the Peace of Mind Compliance Package. And that's taking that assurance, or it's taking that actually monitoring gateway. So we talked about that proprietary monitoring gateway that we have that Bear went into a little bit of detail on. Put the assurance warranty piece on just that piece because we didn't install your lights, just on that one. So it's completely covered. Brought in those optional inspections, put it in as part of this package. And then we even had a guaranteed way to establish communications with it for the data backhaul by putting in a cellular modem. So we took those three things, and this always sounds like an insurance company or surgical commercial, but we bundled them together, threw a discount on them, and we came up with this, what we call Peace of Mind Compliance Package. So again, these are for folks that have a nice working lighting system, but really need help and want to save money on all the compliance requirements that they have out there. So you get all the benefit of those options that we do for an existing system. And if the time did come for you to get a new lighting system and you were happy with what we were doing, this is a nice, easier path to actually get our full TLAS program involved. And that could be years down the road after we've been doing your peace of mind for a while. Go ahead, Bear. So here's where we are at the end here. So we're going to kind of sum up, and Bear mentioned this earlier. We took all that, we showed you some of the different tower types. Like, I know this is kind of small on your screen here, but you have the A style, which is on the left. You had that E style, that dual mode, which is on the bottom, in the middle, in the green. And then there's some, the four on the right-hand side are your high intensity and so on. But either way, what this poster is depicting that latest circular M and all the required lighting system for the different tower types, whether it's, again, a high intensity with a 40-foot plus appurtenance or something along those lines, whether it is a painted tower. And in the upper left-hand corner, which I guarantee you probably can't see, is that compliance checklist that we showed you easier. So it's a little cheat sheet for you as well, too. So we turned this into a really nice 11 by 17 or a 24 by 36 poster that we give out for free. So it's really simple. If anyone is interested in it, you can either just shoot me an email, which Josh had my email on the email he sent out to the whole group. Or if you go to the next page, Barry, you can actually just send it right over to info at the upper right-hand corner, info@lumenserve.com, and we're happy to send out a free poster. Not only that, you could also, through that email, or again, through the email directly to me, if you're ever curious to see what our program would look like on one of your towers or a tower, some folks kind of get into the consultant side of things and they say, hey, somebody's been asking me for some help over here, and I thought maybe you might be a good fit for that. All we need is some ASR numbers in 30 minutes, and we can kind of go through exactly what a program would look like on any tower that you can think of, one of your towers or not. So that's pretty much everything we had for you guys today. We want to see what other questions that you have. I was trying to do my best to wrap it up because Bear promised an hour, so he knew that when he gave it over to me, it was going to take a little longer. So I tried to hurry that up there at the end. But either way, we want to make sure that this was useful for you guys tonight. We couldn't even bribe you with a free dinner. So we really appreciate your time coming out here and spending your time either, out in space or at home to come and join us. So we want to see what other questions you guys might have today.
You don't know us very well. Sometimes we go longer than an hour, so
All right, good. No
that's not a
problem.
problem. But yeah, anybody else have any questions before I throw mine in?
I don't have anything. Bob or Christian, you guys got anything?
I didn't have much. I was just gonna say I was soaking it all up. I appreciate you guys, letting all that information out.
Great. And
Yeah.
you'll get the PDF as we mentioned too. So
Great.
So do you? I've got. Start with this question. With the staffing constraints and budget tightening at different facilities, broadcast or other, do you find that you're becoming more and more in demand because of that?
Yes.
people do like
Outsourcing?
saving that CapEx money. I will tell you that they do like saving that and use that for other projects that they really need that they can't kind of spread out or do it as a service. We'll talk to a small AM, right? I mean, talk about where the money is not. We'll talk to a small AM and they may have an array of 2 or 3 of them and they're just looking at the dollar amount because they don't have a waiver on all 3 of them. So they have to replace all 3. It could be big money if they're writing that check for it. So yeah, I would say that we definitely we fit that niche, but at the same time, I will admit I have folks that say, I just don't have enough income coming in. I can't do it. And that's when I say, okay, but just in your mind, think about what it would cost if you didn't do it, if something was to go wrong and so on, or not meet these compliances. But
How do you mentioned about notifying the FAA with NOTAMs? I'm very familiar with that being involved in aviation. How do you do that? Just through a phone call, or do you have
Phone call.
Yep.
just a phone call? The FAA doesn't have a way you can electronically send that like an email or something. They haven't
No.
modernized that system yet.
Not yet, but they really know our guys. I'll tell you that. So when there was remember the AT&T outage? That was that a year ago now? I can't remember how long ago that was. I don't, maybe it didn't affect you guys up here in the Northeast. It hit us pretty hard. We had a lot of NOTAMs that day. Doesn't mean the lights were out. It's just that when you lose connectivity and you can't prove that that light's on, you have to report it as a NOTAM. And anyone that had an AT&T cellular modem built in there for the data backhaul, we had no choice but to put them on NOTAM. Our guys were a little busy that day, but it didn't last too long. So
Yeah, they're on the phone. Hey, I got a long list for you.
yeah, yeah.
I got 100 towers here. I got a tower I got to report in one
Yeah.
phone call.
By the time you get finished with the list, AT&T was back up and running and take them all off.
You mentioned about the lens inspections, and people don't realize that plastic's just not plastic. And they are plastic, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there was an interesting story from Belden I'll share. We got a complaint from a customer who said this white cable was not white. It was changing color. I think it was turning pink. I don't know if it was in the warehouse or where it was. And our brilliant chemist figured out what was happening. And he was brilliant with chemistry stuff. And he figured out that the exhaust fumes from the LP gas powered forklifts were interacting somehow with
Wow.
what was in that insulation material or jacket material in that cable. It was causing it to change color.
That's impressive.
But people don't realize, you don't think about it. You just think plastic's plastic. But if it doesn't have the proper UV treatments and stuff in it, even if it does, eventually, the sun and the weather and everything's going to take its toll on that. It's so that type of stuff isn't going to last forever.
What I tell people about cabling is outdoor cabling is rated outdoor cabling for a reason, and it's because of the necessary UV protection. Otherwise, you stick other cable out there and it's just gonna fade.
Yep.
Yeah, UV and sunlight resistance and all that. I could talk about that for a while. But anyway, yeah, that there's cables that even indoors, there was a situation where I think it was like one of the big three networks had some cable and something with the cable is discoloring just in the racks because there were lights above it or something, and they found out that it didn't have the proper UV resistance or something, and it's had to change it or something like that. But yeah, things just don't, our world of plastics, they just don't, regardless of what they say about all this stuff, all this stuff lasting a long time, it does deteriorate with its disposed elements.
And we put systems in the harshest environments. So that literally that first picture Bear was showing you from page 1, that is up in North Dakota, like overlooking Canada. So, we've gone through pretty much everything you can. We've got them down in Florida where hurricanes are coming through on a very regular basis. So we've seen it all.
Yeah, brittleness, plastic is brittle. So do you, back to the service part of that, do you employ all your own like tower crews and everybody to do that, or how do you take care of that? The inspections, do you have all your own staff of people that do that?
We have people that do that, and then we have 2 captive crew companies that we work with for a decade and a half that do 99% of their work with us.
Okay.
And so it's all under our control, and that's where we're able to control our costs and whatnot. But we've grown and we got a lot of customers in your areas. I think the message for everybody is we'll send you all the information. If anybody has any lighting stuff come up that we can just help them with, just questions or whatever, contact us. We're happy to help out. We're big supporters of SBE. We've done a ton of these meetings and we've met some great people. And we've got a lot of SBE customers. We actually had a special at the end of last year to celebrate our 50th SBE Prezo. That lapsed at the end of the year, but we're happy to, if anybody has an interest or they come across somebody that wants a proposal, Jamie can get that to you very quickly. We'll have a presentation to you and can go through that. But if you just have questions about a certain tower issue or lighting issue, just call us and we'll help you out.
Oh, I do. Jamie and Barry, you said you're both SBE members. Are either of you certified? SBE certified?
No, our company is
our company's a member. I'm a mechanical engineer. Nobody laugh at me, okay?
That's okay.
I can.
I can't laugh at you for being a mechanical engineer. My father-in-law is a mechanical engineer, so.
Okay. No, we have our top chief engineer is in Air Force Academy, double E. He's the one with all the brains on the engineering side. But no, we've got a ton of experience. What's interesting is a lot of our customers will come to us and say, "Hey, we got 10 towers. We need one of them. We want you to come buy the new lighting system, install it. But the other 9, we want you to monitor, put it under the Peace of Mind compliance program." So we monitor all these lighting systems across the country in some instances from different vendors and manufacturers and installations. So we see everything. And so we believe we've got as much knowledge as anybody in the country in regards to lighting systems. So happy to help out however we can help you guys out.
Absolutely.
Are there still a lot of the xenon and incandescent systems out there, or are those pretty much going away?
A bunch
There's
of
still
them.
a lot out there. There's still plenty.
Yeah. And
It's the majority, Carl. It's still the old technology.
Really, that's still out there.
But that said, we replace a lot of LED systems because remember, if you look at those pictures that we showed, there's some LED systems out there that cause trouble too. You take a 7 or 8 year old various vendors and you're like, and they're paying a lot more money for a tower climb to go do a repair. And so we can resolve that issue because our every great company has a guarantee. So if you go to Nordstrom's and you say this sweater I bought 30 years ago has a hole in it, they will take it back. So ours is that as long as you're doing business with us, you know how much you're going to pay for tower lighting as long as that tower is under contract forever. You know the exact amount.
Yep.
Do you ever have any RF issues like AM towers or any type of issues with RF affecting the lighting? Since
Yeah,
it's the
so it
LED
doesn't
lighting.
affect that. So we've had probably about 4 that were, RF is RF, and you guys know that. And we've solved them with different issues. With all of our media installations, we use armored cable in the RF area. We also use some these ferrite rings in some instances to solve issue. We use some certain grounding. We've got a number of AM towers that are that we convert from A style to painted. So occasionally run into those, but we mitigate them. And remember, if we're buying the lighting system and getting it up and running and then taking care of it, any issues like that we deal with because we've just partnered with you to buy that lighting system.
Cool. Well, if nobody has any more questions, we'll go ahead and end it. And thank you guys very much for your time. We appreciate you coming in and going over all this with us.
Jamie will send you the prezo, and then you guys can distribute it along with the recording and whatnot. If anybody has anything they need, let us know. And God bless you guys. We appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you very much for your time, guys.
Good
Thank
to see
you.
you again.
We
Learn some
really
new things.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Have a great night.
Thank
See
you.
you guys.
Around.